So yeah, Kiar. Okay. Kiar is the main image for a movie, and it's basically the image that you want to have represent your film pretty much in all spaces. Um, Trying to share my screen. Oh, good, I can share my screen. Let me pull this up. Mostly when people think of key art, they think of posters. Um, and I think is my screen sharing now? I think I had to say it loud. All right. Is my screen up? And I'm not sure which one it would be. Are you guys looking at the
Collection.
row of posters? Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so these are all examples of key art. And again, key art is generally thought of as a movie poster. More and more, it's VOD art, which you see on when you go onto streaming platforms. Um, and this is what I design. I've been doing it for 25 years. Um, these are some of the films I've worked on. Um, I used to do mostly stuff for studios and um, the television networks. And then about 15 years ago, I started to move over into the independent space and I started my own company. Um, that called The Robot Eye,
The independent.
where these are more independent films. And these are posters that I've made for independent films. And again, like these are key art. So like these images are designed to work both in um, as standalone pieces of art, and then they also work well when shown together side by side with a lot of other pieces in the streaming platforms. And basically, what you want to have with key art is you want to have one single image that is easily identifiable and has makes it easy for the audience to be able to tell what the genre of the film is and get a general idea of the tone of the film. Those are kind of the most important aspects of key art. Um,
And the problem that I had recently that you know about, and a lot of us who are trying to get something off the ground find that the trouble with the hard part about making some of these key art items is when you don't have a cast yet. What do you do? Can you talk a little bit about that?
yeah, so when you don't have a cast, um, or for actually I have some examples of pitch posters here. This is an old PDF, but I've done a fair amount of posters where the film hasn't been cast or there is no cast to speak of. And generally, what you do is you lean on imagery that might help portray what the film is about. Um, so these are posters that most of these I think here were just scripts. They weren't films yet. A little bit like yours. So stock photos, and more recently generative AI. Although you have to be a little bit careful with AI images because if a film looks too much like it came out just straight out of AI and doesn't it looks more like it's about the art that AI created as opposed to the story that the film is going to be telling. It starts to just look like it kind of goes into a slush pile and people tend to just look over it and look past it. The same was true a lot of times with stock photography. You have to do things to make the art look interesting or unique to the picture that you're selling. And that comes through a lot of the times with title treatments. Um, and just finding images and treating them in a way that makes it look like a film um, that might be a little bit interesting or it might be an image that people haven't seen before. This was actually a good example of that sort of stuff. A really successful uh, indie film was The Sound of Freedom, and I worked on it before the film was made, and we didn't have anything to work with yet. Um, I think this image actually did come from like a test shoot or something like that. You can see a little bit of a watermark in there. Because this was just an early preliminary poster. Um, this is stock photos put together. So your film up
I'll preface
here had,
the background story. I started by making a little pitch deck of my own, and I showed it to a producer who said, "Well, if this is your pitch deck, you better off not having a pitch deck." And so I sent it to Chris, and he transformed it into something much better. And we take a look at some of those things here.
so yeah, I'm finding the initial. Did you want to look at the whole pitch deck or just the main image?
Choose.
So this is the original pitch deck um image, and it doesn't honestly like it at first glance it doesn't necessarily look like a movie. It could be a lot of different things. You would almost need to read screenplay, and it's just because the visually it doesn't communicate any kind of story or human relationships that would come through in a film. Um, so this is where we went to, and I think you had actually sent me a different cover. I apologize, I pulled up the wrong one. Because you had sent me a cover with a boat that we were working off of.
Because I thought that was a scene that where you really can't see who the people are, and it would be, useful to kind of give a hint of what some part of the film would look like when I don't have any actual photos or cast attached yet.
Yeah, and a lot of the projects that I work on that are like the one that you have, where like the initial idea actually isn't bad. You know, the people in the boat, it's a scene from the film where I believe they're going to spread ashes. Um, it's just in the execution, there's a lot of things going on here that are sort of not what key art usually looks like, and that being that there's a lot of type, and it's all of the elements are fighting with each other. So generally, you want to try to have the type flow and complement each other, and so we basically did the same idea: people in a boat on a lake in or yeah, a lake in Ireland. Um, and we just recreated that same image. And this actually has most actually there is a version of this that has all the same type because it's a cell sheet where we just put the type down at the bottom. Actually, I can open that one. Um, yeah, so it just handles the type in a way where everything is just centered and down the middle, and the title stands out and is the hero of the art based on a true story. Lets you know right away again that it's a narrative story as opposed to um, apologize. Here, the journey home and back again is kind of actually what I see first. I don't really see the title until after I see all the white type. Generally, you see the brightest thing on the screen first. Um, and usually you want it varies, but usually you either want the image to be full bleed or have some kind of transition that makes the hierarchy of what you want people to see and notice come through. So this one just allows like the scene to draw us in a little bit more to the people on the boat.
Picture is artificially generated.
Yes. So this is actually a combination of artificially generated imagery and stock photography. Um, and I'm not in Photoshop, so it's not going to let me it's not going to let me zoom through it the way I usually do. The other one I can zoom in on because it's only one page. So the people on the boat now are stock photography. The boat itself was generative AI out of Mid Journey. The background is generative AI, and then I believe the clouds are stock photos. Once they get past a certain point. So the idea here is that you, again, you don't want to have everything look like it's generative AI. Um, Although it's getting good enough to the point now where a lot of and soon you won't be able to tell the difference anymore, and that's actually starting to happen already with some images. Um, there was a period for the first year or two that AI was doing pretty decent photoreal generation, but you could tell which was which. Now the tells are slipping away, and I actually even sometimes on this one like I couldn't remember if the background was from stock imagery or not. Um, so the designer's job really is a lot of the time to just make sure the type works and all the elements work and everything's just nice and balanced.
Say was my worst mistake on the one I made.
Though I've been doing this for a long time, and there's a lot of projects that I've worked on where we took art that a producer made, not a designer, um, and then transformed it into something that would go onto the platforms. And a lot of times, like the art has issues where the title may not be as readable as we would like, And again, it's like you want to establish the genre, you want to make the film look like it has some quality to it that reminds people a little bit of films within the same genre that they maybe have seen before. Um, you don't necessarily have to have a name cast. Like this film had a cast already attached. They're not famous people. Um, but they are attractive and you kind of selling the character. You can tell that this is a science fiction film. You can tell it's a little bit of a mind bender because we have him twice. Um, on the original version, the picture that they chose of the lead actor wasn't very flattering. They have a little bit of a portal or something behind him, but you can't really, particularly when it gets small, like you usually see it on VOD streaming services, you lose everything that's sort of behind him. And then the title is just really hard to read. It looks like a seven SPL enters and I'm I guess they have the line in the seven is supposed to be the eyes. And that's something that happens a lot is like when people are newer to design, they tend to overcomplicate it. Um, I got it a little overcomplicated myself here, making the seven into the title, but it still is a very readable title because all the letters are there and present and easy to see. Um, Usually, you want imagery that's going to make sense to the audience right away. So this would be an example on the left of a poster that's not terrible for maybe a project that's in production or hasn't been made yet. Although it doesn't tell you very much about the film either. It's actually hard to tell if this is supposed to be a small building that's just not photoshopped well, or if it's some kind of floating orb or box or something. So this is a confusing image to an audience. They don't wouldn't know what to make of it. Again, the title gets a little bit hard to read. And again, when you think about how it will show up on a streaming service, it's hard to put your finger on what that movie is supposed to be. It could be anything from a documentary to an action movie, which is what it is. It seems to be a lot about the desert, which the movie doesn't have much of that going on. So it's just a sci-fi action movie. So we actually used some of the same elements. We have the floating box and just made it about the planets and um, the protagonist of the film, who is a little bit of a name. Um, a lot of times art will again hard to read title treatment is usually the worst thing you can do on key art. You need to establish the genre and make sure people know what the title are is. Um, And this one is it's a very busy poster, but without a lot of contrast between the different elements. So everything sort of just turns into a mush. Um, the sizes of everybody in the arrangement on the one on the left are very similar. They're either all kind of a medium size or very, very small. So you sort of lose um, any kind of contrast or sense of what they are. And the one on the right, again, we just made the title much more readable, but still distinctive. We still have a number of people, but we reduced it down to three instead of I think it's like seven or eight over here. Um, I guess it's more like five. More contrast, though. We have a focal point where people can look. You can see the weapons. You get a sense that it's a futuristic, apocalyptic, Mad Max kind of world that we're living in. Um, Again, here this one reminds me a little bit of more of the crossing in its initial phase, where this looks like it was designed in uh, probably a word processor or something like that. It's just too many images. An audience wouldn't know where to look. It's very hard to tell what the title is. Black Beach, White Beach aren't really connected. There's so much type going on in so many different places that it's hard to really wrap your head around what you're supposed to be looking at. Um, so the key art that we designed to replace it focused just on the black and white, and again, it made the title very readable. And now you understand, like looking at it, you get the feeling right. If you don't look at it very closely, you understand that it's about bikes and the beaches and the beach because it says beach twice on the title, and you see the motorcycle guy on it, and then you understand that it's a little bit about how a beach handles the two different races at different times. Usually, you don't want to get that much into storytelling in key art, and it's more usually about the mood. But that's an example of that. This one again, it's solving sort of the same thing again, where it's not as bad on the next one. Here, there's way too many images to for an audience to figure out what they're looking at. Here, the one on the left isn't really a terrible poster, but it's not as clean and in a streaming environment. There's just it's a little bit harder. There's nothing in there that says wine right away, and the film is about wine. So we just went with this a more simplified, still featuring the main character in the documentary, but making it less about his face and just more about the wine. So people, wine documentaries are their own genre, and on this one you might be a little hard pressed to know what it was about. Or on the one on the right, it's pretty obvious.
You say that the image and the title are equally important, or do you want people to really be hit with the title more than anything?
Um, for VOD art, which is something we do a lot of, I think the title really, really, really needs to stand out. They're both important, but there's a lot of parts of the image that can be forgiven if it's a simple image. Like err on the side of simplicity and a title that's a little bit distinctive. If you don't have much to work with, a lot of times I will put most of my focus on the title because a lot you can do a lot of different things with an image and still have the art look professionally done as long as the title is readable and distinctive.
How long does it take you to typically to do one of these?
Um, they vary. It usually takes typically um the first one takes about 6 hours. The second one takes about three, and then two, and then one, and then I can start churning out comps, every about an hour at one per hour after the first like four or five. Will oftentimes when we do a poster presentation, we'll do several designs, and a lot of figuring out how the art's going to go together goes into the first couple, um, and then we break them out from there. Trying to think if I have a presentation that I could show to kind of give a sense of what we do a lot of the time. Can't think of any off the top of my head because yours was sort of a one-off. We just did one. Um, I don't think I have a presentation that I can show necessarily, but usually we do a handful of different comps to choose from, and they just focus on different parts of the film.
In the end, they select one. That's the poster, right? Rather than, do they often have several different images for one film?
Um, yes, although um, it's best if they can look like they all do belong together. Um, Gosh, I'm trying to think of some examples of that.
While we have a moment of silence here, I want to just encourage everybody who's here to think about what questions you may have. We're going to have a little Q&A session, so I'm hoping for some very insightful questions.
It's interesting. Independent films, like as far as where key art's concerned, independent films and the blockbusters have kind of traded places a little bit. Where something like what Captain America's done, I wouldn't recommend for independent films. Like each individual poster here, just speaking of a lot of different posters, each individual poster that they've got um is a nice poster by itself, but they don't really create a, for the most part, they have very different art styles. And if you were to see one poster on a streaming platform and then a different one on social media, you wouldn't necessarily know it was the same film, except for that the IP is already known so well. Whereas with independent films, you generally want, well, it was an indie film. Long Legs is a good example of one. You have something that's branded. So like they have a lot of different pieces of art here. But if you see one and then you see another one later, you can tell it's the same movie. Like there's no doubt that this is part of a series that belongs together. Um, so it doesn't dilute your own brand. Um, the major studios don't have to worry about that as much again because they're usually dealing with established IP that people know the character anyway or the series. But independent films really need to have something that's distinctive. Here it's the sort of misaligned super red title. Um, that's just very distinctive. And it's just again, this is a good example too of how the art is very understated each time. Like the image doesn't really matter that much, so that the title can just kind of like own the day on every piece. And then this was like their official poster that was in the theaters and stuff. So this is like the main key art, where the others are just sort of like supporting it.
So when people do their own poster, what would you say is the most typical thing they're doing wrong? Too much stuff,
Um,
many things.
the first giveaway when a poster is being handled in kind of a wrong way is it's too cluttered and the type is usually not treated very well. There's also sometimes like Obey is an example of it too, where the images are too small and the poster overall is too dark. Most distributors don't like dark posters because they tend to disappear on the platforms. Um, it's important to think, again, and when the art goes to its final stage, it's usually being looked at very small side by side with a lot of other pieces of art. So if you have just a little tiny row of people, it doesn't really tell people much, a potential audience very much about the film. You would never guess this movie was about a rave, where the larger art allows, a sense of relationship and there's a little bit of attention there. And the orange in his hair with the dancers, which you can't tell they're dancers there, but or the dancing crowd, but you can tell that there's something interesting about it. You can tell the age, um, there's a vibe to it that allows the audience to see themselves a little bit. There is a saying, we say that a lot. You want to show the audience themselves. And that's why a lot of times featuring people, even if they're not the people who not famous people, they're either the character, they either represent a distinctive character or they represent who the audience sees themselves as. So it's like right away people who look like this and are aware, these people see themselves in these films and they just watch them over and over. So we feature people a lot, and there's no celebrities in here, not really, but um and then just clean type.
You have a favorite of all the posters you've done?
Oh, I have a soft spot for Turbo Kid in terms of posters that have done for the Robot Eye, um, which I'm sure is here. This one, it's not the greatest VOD art, but I love it as a poster. I grew up enjoying Drew Struzan's posters with lots of floaty heads and lots of scenes and a ton going on. And there's just a lot happening in this poster, and it's a delicate balance of a lot of different things, and it has a lot of Easter eggs in it and stuff. So I enjoy Turbo Kid. I'm also a fan of shedding. Oh, this is another example of actually a series of posters where they all have a similar look and a similar style. So they kind of like complement each other. The one here with the man standing on the cat's head is the main poster. This film is a little bit of an experimental film, and I think one of the reasons I like this one is I like doing um a little more out of the box unusual posters from time to time because I do a lot of posters. Um, and it's not always appropriate to the film, but in this one, the movie is a very strange movie. It was shot on an iPhone during the pandemic. It's a very good film actually, but it takes a while. Like the first 10 minutes of the film is just a cat in an apartment. And it does actually expand in a surprising way. But I remember talking to the filmmakers about how we want the poster to be a little bit strange so that the audience will give the movie a little bit of room to do its thing and grow. The One of the things about posters is they tend to be the first thing that the audience sees about the film. They'll see the key art on their platform or a social media post or a press release about it. They might check out the trailer and then they see the film. And it sort of sets the tone for what the film is going to be like. Um, I think a good example of that actually is Little Miss Sunshine, which let's call it up. Tab there. I worked at the shop that made this, and it was a lesson for me in how a poster can change the movie that you see. Because Steve Carell was known for comedy, obviously. And the film though is actually it's a drama, but most people received the poster or the film as a comedy because the poster sells it that way. And it sort of leans into lighter sides of the film rather than the darker sides. Where a different poster for that movie would kind of lead you to a different experience with it. And I think that's actually one of the things that's nice about having elevated key art is that sometimes with an indie film, there needs to be a little bit of grace given to the production value of the film on occasion. And a nice poster will oftentimes put people in the right mindset to sort of get into the film and understand that there's a journey to be had, you know, and I think shedding does that actually really well. It's an example of that. Whereas if you just had a shot of a cat sitting on a mat in an apartment, it would look like a home video, and then when you get into the movie, it would look like a home video, and the audience would probably give up on it before they had a chance to see that there was a deeper story to be told. And I think key art can help people bridge that gap, and it puts them in the right mindset for certain things.
There's a lot to think about that goes into all this. I'm going to try to get into our Q&A segment here. Jordan is out in the audience with a microphone. I'm hoping that somebody has a great question. Raise your hand if you have something you'd like to bring up with Chris. And we can't see you, so tell us who you are and go.
Hello. Oh, hi. Um, so I just had a question. You kind of alluded to it earlier with the talk about how like the darkness of a poster and how it catches or doesn't catch like the eye on like a streaming service. I guess I was just curious, are there like colors that are kind of more you're encouraged to shy away from or maybe like lean in towards because they'll like grab the eye more on like a streaming service? I was just curious.
Yeah, actually, green is a no-no. You'll notice very few to no green posters. I mean, there's like a little bit of green here, but this is mostly a white poster. Um, there's not much green. I'm seeing a couple, but not much, and it's mostly. And I don't know why that is. That was something I was told a long time ago. Green is just absolutely no go. Um, Blues and reds work really well. There was a poster. Blues, reds, and oranges are the most liked colors. Um, the biggest thing that they don't want to have the art happen to the art is they just don't want it to disappear. I think black is okay for the edges if you have something bright in the middle, like if you have a central image. A lot of marketing departments still don't like that just because they've been a little like I was told don't make green posters when I was a kid, and it just kind of stuck with me. I mean, that might even be the reason why we don't see them is because probably everybody was taught that. Um, the marketing departments oftentimes when people are coming up they're told like don't allow dark posters, so like a lot of times I happen to like know that these three made it through just fine. But there are marketing um advisors out there who will absolutely just not let anything even with a dark edge go through because they don't want to get lost. um
So a thought, a question, a comment in the back. Don't forget to tell us who you are.
My name's Michael. I was wondering, when do you know you have enough information about the film to make the poster?
Do you mean like is the pose like the do you have the concept still and you want to know like when you're ready to
Would you watch the film or do you just ask a few certain questions about it?
I watch the film when I can when there's an existing film which is normally the case. I watch it, I get a feel for it. I again I tend to think of the poster as leading people into the film. So when I'm working on something that's going to have a large budget, like Spider-Man 3, um, the old one, like several Spider-Mans ago. The way I would always approach those is I knew the trailer was what most people would see, and then I would try to make the poster based on the trailer so that they would when they saw the poster they'd remember a moment from the movie that was in the trailer and they kind of connect the campaign that way. With independent films, I usually try to pull imagery from the first 15 minutes of the movie. Um, Again, so that people have that introduction to the film and they feel like they're connecting with the film. Um, I think that one of the worst things you can do in today's world is sell a movie that it doesn't feel like the movie that people are watching in the first 15 minutes. because if you have something look like a big action movie in the key art and then it is kind of slow burn to get started, even if those action sequences come later, the audience will tune out and it's too easy for them to switch away from it these days. So, I mean, there was a time where you would just put an explosion on the poster and sell it that way. But now I feel like it really has to represent the film. So I like to watch the movies and get a sense of the film as much as I can.
Yeah, I think we have time for one more question. Somebody up front there. And hopefully we get that in before Zoom cuts us off. We have the free membership here.
How often are you finding the people who think that you're going to make key art from frames of the film and it proves that it's just not good enough resolution, and are a lot of people stopping and getting shots, still shots on set to help? Is a good producer getting still shots on set to give key art options to you?
It depends a little bit on the type of movie. I love getting good still photography. I've got a little cheat guide that I always send people so that I can make sure I get like nice shots. Um, it's not super necessary anymore, particularly. It's very easy to upres photos now. With action movies and drama, um, a certain kind of gritty action movies and drama, I almost prefer to work from shots from the film because they will have the the feel and the tone of the movie is kind of baked in. But a slick action movie, something more like that has more of a studio feel or comedies is very nice to have the cast shot nice and clean. Rom-coms in particular, um, it's it's not it's not easy to try to make a connection between two people that is not that's captured on screen usually. One thing though that I would give as advice if you do have pull asides where you get talent to get shots, make sure that they're in character while they're doing the still photos. A lot of times we'll get photography from a film that where people did pull asides and they're like maybe he's a gritty action hero, but he'll end up looking like he's taking headshots. So like the biggest advice I can give for that on-set photography is like get your actors while they're still like acting like they're in character.
One more question for you, Chris. If people here or listening afterwards want to get your help creating art for their film, how can they find you?
I'm on the roboteye.com. My website is the best place to, there's a contact form on there. Uh, TheRoboteye.com. Um, and all my socials are linked there too. And there's an email form. So that's the best way to reach out to me.
Great.
And even if you just want to